I personally ever read. It was Hooked, How to Build Habit-Forming Products, which is still considered a must-read for product managers and entrepreneurs today. Since then, Nir has released another bestseller, Indistractable, How to Control Your Attention and Choose Your Life, which is another must-read for every junior product, especially for you guys starting your new position soon. Nir was a lecturer for Stanford and successfully sold 2 startups already, and he's currently an active investor backing habit-forming products, which he believes improve lives. You may have heard about some of Nir's portfolio investments even during this course. They include Eventbrite, Kahoot, Canva, and Product Hunt. Nir, it's really an honor to have you here.
Oh, thank you so much. It's great to be here with you.
So, Nir, what can you tell us about yourself that ChatGPT didn't already mention?
Good question. I'm not sure what ChatGPT knows about me. Let's see. So I'm a behavioral designer. So I help companies build the kind of products and services that improve people's lives through healthy habits. Born in Israel, but I left when I was 3 years old. So העברית שלי כמעט כמו שמישהו בן 3. So not very good Hebrew, but sorry, I see like half of you laughing at my Hebrew now. Sorry. I bet ChatGPT didn't know that. And now I am calling in from Singapore.
Cool. Cool. So we've asked the guys to submit questions for you before the session. Guys, we've already published the link. Owen should have sent it here on the chat. So we'll invite you each by name to introduce yourself and ask your question. And we can go ahead and get started, I think, with Omer Kirschenbaum. He has a question about teaching Indistractable at schools.
I'm here. My name is Omer Kirschenbaum. My question was, what would be your top 3 points from Indistractable to be taught to the next generation if we could combine them in the education system? And do you have a suggestion for how to combine them so we can implement them effectively for the next generations, of course?
Oof. So how can I answer this question succinctly? So I'll give you for some quick tips. I'm happy to go in depth into the Indistractable model, but I think essentially the world is bifurcating into 2 types of people: people who will allow their time and attention to be controlled and manipulated by others, and people who stand up and say, no, I will decide how I control my time, my attention, and therefore my life. And so if you think the world is distracting now, just wait a few years. I think the world is going to become only a more distracting place. And so it absolutely behooves us to teach our children how to manage their attention. There is no more important skill than learning how to manage your attention. So yeah, it's an absolutely critical skill. There's a whole chapter in the book on how to raise indistractable kids. I'll give you some very quick tips. You asked for the quick tips, and then we can go into more depth if anybody's interested, because there's a whole framework built about this. And it took me 5 years to write this book, so I can go into all the depth you want. But I would say the first thing that we can do in raising indistractable kids is to be indistractable parents and role models. I can't tell you how many parents I encounter who tell me, oh my God, my kid is addicted to Fortnite. He won't get off TikTok. And meanwhile, as they're telling me this, they're checking email. We can't do that. We have to stop being hypocrites. That the best way to raise indistractable kids is to be an indistractable parent yourself. By the way, this applies to the workplace as well. I get called in, they pay me thousands and thousands of dollars to come and do a talk and teach their company how to become indistractable. And I get into the boardroom, and guess who's on their phone? Is it the young people? No, it's the big boss who wants to show everybody how important they are. They have to constantly check their device in the middle of all the meetings. So whenever we're in a position of authority, whether as a parent, as a teacher, as a boss, we have to display what it means to be indistractable ourselves. The next thing I would do for kids is to teach them how to manage their emotions. One of the things that I discovered in my research in this book is that 90% of our distractions, 90%, begin from within. That the myth is that we're distracted because of all this stuff outside of us. And that is true to some extent. About 10% of our distractions, studies have found this, 10% of our distractions begin from outside of us, 90% begin in our own heads. Why? Because distraction is fundamentally an impulse control problem. We are fundamentally trying to escape some kind of emotional discomfort, boredom, loneliness, fatigue, uncertainty, stress, anxiety. This is the source of 90% of our distractions. So whether it's too much news, too much booze, too much football, too much Facebook, it doesn't matter. You're always going to find distraction in one thing or another if you don't understand what is driving you to distraction in the first place. So we have to stop blaming the technologies, stop blaming the tools, and understand that they only play a proximal cause. They're only part of the problem. The real problem is that we don't know how to deal with discomfort. That's the real problem. That life is so good in this day and age, right? In this year, 2023, for most people, every little discomfort needs to be escaped, right? You're slightly hungry, you have to get a snack. You're uncomfortable, you need to move around. You're bored, you have to entertain yourself. Constant stimulation to take our mind off of the discomfort. So that's why I say time management is pain management. I would expand that to say weight management is pain management. Money management is pain management. Every human behavior is pain management. And so that's this fundamental skill we all have to learn, let alone to teach our children. Then I think another tip is to teach children how to have a schedule. I think that's incredibly important. By the way, all these tips are important for adults as well. I can't tell you how many kids and adults say, oh my gosh, I can't get enough done. I'm so distracted. Did you see what happened in the news and Twitter? And my boss wants this. And oh my God, that and that. I can't get anything done. And then when I say, but what did you plan to do? What did you get distracted from? Show me your calendar. You know what's on most people's calendar? Almost nothing. They have a to-do list a mile long. We can talk about why to-do lists are probably one of the worst things you can do for your productivity. We can talk about that later. But when you look at most people's calendar, they have lots of white space in it. So if I ask them, what did you get distracted from? What did you plan to do? The fact of the matter is you can't say you got distracted unless you know what you got distracted from. All right. You can't say you got distracted unless you know what you got distracted from. So the only way to know you got distracted is to be able to point to something and say, that's what I plan to do. Whatever is not that is distraction. And we can talk about the difference between traction and distraction. So teaching this fundamental skill of having a schedule. Unless you're a child or retired, welcome to the adult world. You have to have a schedule. That's the fact of life. And unless you say, hey, my life's good, I'm living my utmost potential, don't read my book. If you know you can accomplish more, if you know you're capable of even more than you're doing right now, then this is for you. And then one last tip is to, and this is particularly relevant to kids, but also relevant to adults, is that we have to remove the external triggers that don't serve us. So those ping, dings, and rings, one of the big mistakes I see parents making is we allow our kids to have things in their rooms that that disrupt sleep. We all know how important sleep is. We've read 100 books on the topic. We all know sleep is very, very important. But how many of us sleep with our devices, right? How many of us have our phones next to our beds or televisions in the bedroom? Anything that beeps, buzzes, or boops, anything that could disrupt sleep is a problem for children, especially because their brains are developing, but also for adults. So we need to move all those devices, even the old stuff. I'm not talking about, their phones. I'm talking about television. I'm talking about the radio. I'm talking about anything, the fish tank, anything that makes noise needs to be out or emits light that can wake a child up is an external trigger that needs to be removed from a child's room. So those are just for some very quick tips. We can go much, much deeper into this. It's a huge topic.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nir.
Sure.
Cool. So we're moving on to Yoav Marciano with a question on gaming ethics.
Hey, first of all, it's an honor to be here. And my question is regarding gaming ethics. So I work at a gaming company and I hope to move to a product position soon. And I would like to ask you, as a new product manager who's been in the company for a while, how can I ensure that the product I'm working on is actually solving a real problem for our user rather than just being addictive?
Yeah, I'm glad you're thinking about this question. That's fantastic. I will say that most companies, I'm guessing most of the folks here, don't have to worry about this problem. You do, because you're at a gaming company. But the vast majority of us, the problem is not that people are overusing our product. If you're making a SaaS product, nobody's getting addicted to enterprise SaaS, right? Nobody's getting addicted to apps that help you learn a new language or help you save money, right? The problem that most of you will have is not that anybody is overusing the product. The problem that most of you will have is that not enough people care about your product. They underuse it, right? That you're building a product that would really improve people's lives if they use the product. And so that's what Hooked helps people do. Now, there are some companies out there, gaming companies is a great example, where overuse can be a problem. So I think there are three lenses to look at this problem through. One is you as the individual product designer. And so bravo to you for thinking about this. I think that, so in Hooked, I give this two-part test, and this is, something I've been thinking about ethics for a long time. The book was published back in 2014. And so I give a two-part test to people who are building these products. If you want to ask yourself, how do I make sure that I work on a product that doesn't cross the ethical line? By the way, it doesn't mean you can't make money, right? People can make money doing unethical things. But if you care about ethics, I ask you to ask yourself these two questions. Number one, I want you to look at yourself in the mirror and ask yourself, does this materially improve people's lives? Okay, that's question number one. Does this materially improve people's lives? Now, that's not good enough. Not good enough. The second question is, before I tell you what the second question is, the reason I want you to ask the second question is because I want you to break the first rule of drug dealing. Does anybody know? Here we go. We'll do some audience participation. What is the first rule of drug dealing?
Don't get
Anybody?
Don't use your own stuff.
Never get high on your own supply. Exactly. Never get high on your own supply. That's the first rule of drug dealing. So I want you to break that rule. Why? Because the second question is, first question again is, does this materially improve people's lives? Second question, am I the user? Am I the user? Why? Because I want you to be the user. I want you to answer into the affirmative of both those questions. Because if you believe that you are materially improving people's lives and you are the user, if there are any deleterious consequences, guess who's going to be the first to know about it? You will be. So it doesn't mean that there won't be potential harms to the product, right? But if you are building a product that in good conscience, you can look at yourself in the mirror and say, look, it's improving people's lives and I'm the user. Not only is that a good ethical place to be, that's where you will find the greatest odds of business success. Why? Because the hardest part about building a product is building something people want. This is the number one reason people fail at building a new product. Because they build for some amorphous person out there that they don't understand. They build for a customer that they think is going to buy their product, but they have no actually direct feedback from that customer. The best way to hack that process is to be the customer, be the user. If you think about these world-changing companies over the past couple decades, most of them were founded by people who built something they themselves wanted. It's a huge competitive advantage and it's underutilized, right? So if you build for yourself, you are the user and you're building something materially improves people's lives, I say build away, okay? So that's test number one. Now, that's not the only lens. The second lens is in the company. How do you make sure that as a company, you don't use these tactics in unethical ways, okay? If you don't use what's called a dark pattern, right? So there are two kinds of manipulation. Now, manipulation tends to have a bad connotation, but I would argue it's not necessarily bad. There's two types of manipulation. And we need to realize that all design, okay, design is the art of manipulation. I don't care if it's interaction design, graphic design, interior design, all design manipulates people's behaviors or emotion. So manipulation can't all be bad because there's two kinds. The first kind of manipulation is called persuasion. Persuasion is helping people do things they themselves want to do, but for lack of good design, they don't do. Okay, how many of us want to exercise, but we don't? We want to eat right, but not so much. We want to save money. We want to be more productive. Whatever the case might be, we don't do it even though we want to do it because it's too hard to do, right? So that's very ethical. In fact, if you have the skills as a designer and you don't apply them, I would argue not using them to your fullest potential is itself unethical because you're robbing the world of things that they themselves want. You're robbing people of doing these healthy behaviors that they themselves want. So persuasion is very ethical. That's what we want to do. Now, the flip side of persuasion, if persuasion is helping people do things they want to do, coercion is getting people to do things they did not want to do. Coercion is unethical. We never want to use coercive tactics. Not only is it ethically wrong, it's bad for business. If you think about it, if you trick people into doing something that they did not want to do, not only are they not going to do business with you ever again, they're going to tell all their friends not to do business with you ever again. So you can trick them once, and there's all kinds of scams that, fly by night type of things, but that's not a repeat customer, right? You can't build a habit scamming people again and again and again. People are not that stupid, right? People are pretty smart. They won't do business with you again if they regret doing business with you. So you want to use coercive tactics. Now, how do we test this? How in a company can we make sure we don't use coercive tactics? We use what's called the regret test, and you can use this at your gaming company. When you're sitting around the table and everybody's thinking about, okay, here's our backlog, and what if we do this, and what if we do that, and somebody proposes a tactic that you think might be coercive, okay, get people to do something that they later regret. What you do is you propose running what I call a regret test. A regret test says that we bring in a group of users, and we've been doing this forever, right? This is called usability testing. We bring in a representative group of users, and we show them the user flow, and we tell them everything that we know as the designers. And we ask them a very simple question. Knowing everything that I as a designer know, would you regret doing what you just did? And we can do this with as little as 5, 6, maybe 10 users. We bring them in, we show them what we're going to do, and then we see what number of those people we are okay with being unhappy with that interaction, right? Now, we've done this forever. This is not all that dramatic. We're just asking them basically, would they regret doing this? Now, the beauty of a regret test is that most of the time you don't have to run it. That when you're sitting around the table and somebody proposes some kind of dark pattern, if you raise your hand and say, hey, look, boss, before we do this, and we potentially get customer blowback, from not only from our customers, maybe even in the media, before we do that, maybe we should run a regret test. Let's run this on a few users and see what they think. 9 times out of 10, your boss will say, you know what, actually, we can think of something better. Let's not do that. Okay. So we've talked about the individual lens. That's what those 2 questions that we talked about earlier. We've talked about the business lens. Now there's one more lens, which is the societal lens. And that's out of scope. That's not something I work on. I work on individuals and companies. There's a whole nother debate around what kind of legislation we need to protect folks. So the one thing I would add is that I think for gaming companies, you have a special responsibility, because some products, very, very few products, have the potential of addicting people. Now, what do I mean by that? Addiction is not something that happens to every product. It happens only when it is used by a sufficiently large number of people. Why? Because a certain proportion of the population will get addicted to all kinds of things. All right. It's not the product itself alone. It's part of the equation of addiction, but it's not only that. Meaning, alcohol is very addictive, but not everyone who has a glass of wine on Shabbat is an alcoholic, right? We have sex. We're not all sex addicts, right? So it's not just the product itself. It's not the behavior itself. It's the person interacting with the product. And I think if you know that people are getting addicted to your product, you have a special responsibility, because I would argue that the pathology of addiction, the disease of addiction, if you know someone wants to stop using your product and can't, or is having extreme difficulty, you have a special responsibility. Most products can't do anything about it, right? If you make alcohol, how the heck are you going to know who the alcoholics are? You don't have personally identifiable information. But if you're a gaming company or a social network and you know someone is using a product to an extreme degree, I do think you have a special responsibility, because you know. Now, how would you know? Very simple. You have a number, a baseline number of hours per week. Okay, give me a number. Just make it up. If you spent 20 hours, 30 hours, 40 hours a week with our product, we're going to send you a very polite, respectful message that says, hey, we see that you're using our product to the extent that you might be struggling with an addiction. Can we help? Okay, that's it. Can we help? And if the user doesn't want to, that's fine. That's their prerogative. But if they do ask for help, if they do say, hey, you know what? Yes, please put me on a blacklist, or I'd like some resources to help me with an addiction. Can you refer me somewhere? Yes, then you have that special responsibility. This is what I call a use and abuse policy. So maybe sorry for the very long answer. It's a great question. So I wanted to answer it as well as I could.
Thank you very much. It was a great answer.
Sure. Thanks.
So that was a really great answer on how do we recognize the unethical parts of what we're doing. And Shani Azar has, Hadar Israel has a question on what you actually do about it when you run into it.
Yes, hello, and thank you. As a junior product manager in a company, if I recognize an unethical technique in a habit formation technique, what can I do?
So if your company is using some kind of unethical design practice, what do you do about it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the right thing to do is to call it out. And now I know that's easier said than done, but I don't think it's any different from any other unethical practice, right? If you saw the company cooking the books, if you saw the company doing some kind of illegal practice with customer data, if you saw sexual harassment, if you saw racial prejudice in hiring, what do you do? Same thing you would do if you saw a dark pattern being used that you think is unethical. You do the courageous thing. I know it's not easy. That's why we call it brave. And you stand up and you say something about it, or you leave. And you leave, maybe.
I think there's a special kind of complexity when it's a junior product that notices that, right? It's someone who isn't high enough to actually have an impact. So I'm wondering if you have any advice on how to specifically try and talk about it in order to kind of, amid the negative feelings it might include.
So one thing you can do is let me take the blame, for example. Hold on one second. Let me put this in the chat. You can, one second. So blame it on me. Send them this article. Where's the chat function here? Here, say this guy Nir, he's crazy. I don't know if he's any good, but well, you know what? Read this article about this regret test. Maybe we should do this. Maybe it's a good idea. And let me take the blame. Let them call me crazy. So you're just sharing information. And if you see that they ignore it, they passed up the opportunity to do the right thing, to do the right ethical thing, then maybe time to hunt for other jobs.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
So moving on to Shani Azar, who has a question about about getting started. Sorry.
Okay, so hi Nir. My question is, what advice would you have for junior product managers who are just starting out their careers? And what are some of the most important skills they should focus on developing?
For junior product managers, you mean general skills or specifically as it comes to behavioral design?
Whatever comes in mind. Whatever advice you have.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the most important skill of a PM is customer empathy. I'm sure it's not the first time you've heard that, but really understanding your customer is super, super important. Now, I think we tend to emphasize, I think, a bit too much what people say and not enough what people do. We'll do qualitative interviews where we'll talk to people and we'll ask their opinion and we'll do customer development. And then we'll go back and we'll say, okay, well, 6 people said this and 2 people said that, and we'll try and quantify it somehow. And that's good to some extent, right? We, of course, need to listen to customers, but it's even more important to be able to predict what they will do. And so we've all, the more experience that you get, you'll notice that what people will say they will do is very different from what they actually will do, right? Everybody, if you haven't already, you will at some point experience, you'll build a product, you'll tune it to specifications. It's exactly what I want. Yep, it's perfect. And they don't freaking use it. It drives you crazy because people have what's called revealed preferences that are different from what they say they want. We say we want carrots and celery, but really our revealed preferences show we want chocolate cake and bamba. So it's very important that we know not only how to predict what people say they want, but actually what they will do. And so how do we do that? We need to go deeper than their stated preferences to understand their revealed preferences by understanding consumer psychology. So that's why we need to understand things like variable rewards, like cognitive heuristics, behavioral economics, cognitive biases, right? We need to understand these quirks of human behavior that will cause people to behave maybe differently than we expect. So, of course, you can read my book. I invite you to do that. I'll recommend another book for you that I think not enough PMs read. This one called Alchemy. by my friend Rory Sutherland is excellent. Really, really great book. Because it's one of the few that tackles what he calls the psychological. So you've got logical, and then you've got the psychological, these things that are influenced by our unstated preferences. So read up on consumer psychology. In short, that's my big advice for you.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Shani, and thank you, Nir. Moving on to Idan about physical products.
Hi, Nir. Thank you for
Hi.
talking with us today. So
Sure.
your work is focused on tech products. What advice do you have for product managers working on physical products like consumer goods or medical devices?
Yeah, so physical products have advantages and disadvantages. The advantage of a physical product is that it's a manifestation of the external triggers. So in Hooked, I talk about internal triggers and external triggers. And external triggers are all those pings, dings, and rings that we talked about earlier. And part of the hard part about those external triggers is that when you are on a device, for example, if you're not on someone's home screen and they don't have a habit established, good luck. You might as well not even exist, because they won't even see those pings, dings, and rings, right? If they turn off your notifications, you're screwed, right? They're just going to forget you even exist. With a physical product, if you think about, I don't know, a toaster or, this water bottle, anything that has a physical manifestation, the fact that it's there reminds me to use it. So that's the advantage of a physical product. The disadvantage is that there's a high barrier. There's a lot of friction to getting people to pay for in the first place, right? To buy it so that they can have it and then remind them to use it. But if you can get it in the home, right? If you can get it in front of the user, I'm not exactly, you should tell me more about the product if you want to get more specific. If you can get it in front of them, it's a huge advantage. I mean, for a medical device, I'll tell you a very quick story about a medical device. I was hired to help a company that made a inhaler for asthmatics. Okay. And what was different about this product is that it was to be used as a preventative device. So normally if you're asthmatic and you have an inhaler, you use it when you feel an asthma attack. That's when you use it. But that's not how this was meant to be used. So they were trying to break this existing habit, and they wanted people every morning and every evening to take a puff in order to prevent future asthma attacks. And they had a terrible time. People were constantly forgetting to use it. Why? Because they were taking this thing that looked just like their other asthma inhaler, and they were putting it in their backpack. They were putting it in their purse, and they were forgetting to use it first thing in the morning and last thing at night. So what did they do? First thing they did, big mistake, they built an amazing $1 million app that sent people notifications and reminders. And they spent a ton of money and time on it, and it didn't work. Huge flop, big waste of money. Then they called me, and I worked with them for a little bit. And here's what we did. All we had to do was, when people got their inhaler, we told them specifically to place it next to their toothbrush. Don't put it in your purse, what we told them. Don't put it in your backpack. Put it next to your toothbrush. Why? Because we wanted to attach to this daily habit of first thing in the morning, you brush your teeth, last thing at night, you brush your teeth. That's when you should take a puff. Okay. We even built this little plastic stand that cost us 10 cents to put it, because if you don't, the inhaler would fall over, right? And create a big mess. You want to put it in the stand next to your toothbrush. Okay. So that inhaler itself on this little stand became the external trigger.
I love the answer and love the example. It's really accurate, like how you described it. Thank you.
Excellent. I'm glad I could help.
Thank you, Dan. So moving on to Jody, having a question on time boxes.
Hi, thank you so much. So my question is how can we take advantage of time boxes, but allow for some level of flexibility? So like, I understand the point is to help us do all we could do and want to do. Can't the rigidity of the time boxes backfire? So like, if I create a time box calendar, what happens? I'm in the middle of an important project, and during the time box, I have a lot to work at. I'm really flowing, but then the next time box is starting. So what's the best way to take advantage and flow while breaking, my commitment to the time box calendar?
Absolutely. Yeah. Great question. So first thing is that once you make a time box calendar, the right mental frame, the mindset should not be drill sergeant. Okay. It should not be, this is a schedule. It can never change, has to stick with it. No. You want to be a scientist. What does a scientist do? A scientist makes a hypothesis, runs an experiment, looks at the results, and then runs future experiments. So if you see, hey, you know what? When I make an hour for this specific task, many times an hour is not enough. I get into flow and I want more. Okay, tomorrow, make more time for it. Not today, because you already said it for today, but for tomorrow, you can absolutely change it. And so by doing that, by being able to be flexible and saying, okay, what's the right time? Or what's the right amount of time for a task, and when should that be? You can be flexible as long as it's not in the day. You never want to change the time box in the day, but you can always change it for tomorrow or the next day. Second thing I would recommend is to have several optional tasks in a time box. Okay, so if you say, look, my afternoon is time when I really need to do focused work, but I'm not exactly sure which task I need to do, and they're all, equally important to me, but I like the flexibility and the freedom, for example. You can say, look, I'm going to do focused work on one of these three things. That's fine. Who says you can't do that? I'm not saying you can't do that. So you can give yourself a little menu. And in fact, this is actually very effective because it disarms what we call psychological reactance. Psychological reactance is this reflex that we all have that when we are told what to do, right, we rebel. So when you were a kid and your mom said, hey, put on a coat, it's cold outside, and you had that reaction, don't tell me what to do. Or your boss tells you, micromanages you, and you know how that feels? That feels really icky. That's reactance. What's crazy about the human brain is that we will elicit psychological reactance even when it is us telling ourselves what to do. That's how messed up our minds are. So by giving yourself that freedom to be able to choose between a set of options, all of which are good, productive options, but then saying, I'm going to only work on one of these three tasks, nothing else, totally fine. That's kosher, no problem. The third thing I would recommend is to have what's called planned spontaneity. Okay, planned spontaneity, which sounds like an oxymoron, but here's how this works. So planned spontaneity I use with my daughter. So I have time with my daughter. Every weekend we have 3 hours together where we can do whatever we want. We can go to the park, we can go get ice cream, we can go to the museum, whatever we want to do. I don't know what we're going to do. It's going to be spontaneous. So why do I have to plan the time? Because it's only if I plan that time that I know what I will not be doing. I will not be on my phone. I will not be checking social media. I will not be checking email. That is time to spend with someone I love very much. So that having that time blocked off to make sure that that's where my time and attention will go, but I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but I know who I'm going to do it with. That's another tactic that can be very effective. So between those three, hopefully you'll find that useful.
Yes, thank you so much.
Sure.
Awesome. Thank you, Jody. And moving on to Aviv with keeping things simple.
Hi, Nir. So I'll be quoting from your book. Doing must be easier than thinking, right? How can we apply this principle when the task the user needs to complete is complicated and may take like 20 minutes, or maybe it's something that he doesn't want to do? And more for the context, in a B2B products, in enterprise, like you just mentioned, that you don't get addicted to enterprises products.
Right. Yeah. So where doing has to be easier than thinking is specifically for habits, right? If you want to build a habit, that's true, because what's the definition of a habit? A habit is a behavior done with little or no conscious thought. That's the very definition of a habit. So if it's a product that requires a lot of thinking for 20 minutes, guess what? It's not a habit. And don't even try and make it a habit. I think, in fact, many times, I think we've reached peak habit. We have so many books about habits. People want to turn everything into a habit. And I think that it's a big problem because, I hear a lot of times people ask me, oh, you're a writer. How do I get into a writing habit? Or exercise. How do I create an exercise habit or meditation habit? Bullshit. You cannot create a writing habit or a meditation habit or a workout habit because all those things require hard work. If you're meditating habitually, you're doing it wrong. You're asleep, right? How do you write habitually? How do you write without thinking? I don't know. I've never been able to do it. I've been a professional author for a decade now. You can't write without thinking. It doesn't work that way. These things aren't habits. They're routines. What is a routine? A routine is a series of behaviors frequently repeated. So from a product perspective, don't try and create a habit out of a product or a behavior that will never be a habit. Keep it a routine. From a personal perspective, same thing, right? If you're trying to create a frequent behavior, ask yourself, is this a behavior that has the potential to even become a routine? And if it doesn't, don't focus on trying to make it easy. Don't build the habit. But make sure just to build the routine. What is the specific behavior you're trying to change?
So maybe more for the context, it's a security solution, okay? And it solve issues. And there are some of the issues that are very complicated to solve. And it means that the user need to like take 20 minutes from his life right now and to solve this particular issue. And what we saw that those complicated issues never get solved. The user always go to the easy one that they can accomplish in 5 minutes.
Right. And is it something that they would do? How often would they do this?
So if you ask me, I would like them to do this every day, because even if they start today, they will never solve all of the issues they have because they have so much. So I'm trying to prioritize it and top all the critical ones first, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't make that a habit. If it's something that you say requires 20, 30 minutes of hard thinking, it's never going to be something done with little or no conscious thought. You have to incentivize, right? You have to make it, there needs to be some kind of loss aversion that if you don't do this, something bad's going to happen. You're going to lose your job. You're going to lose money. You're going to have a security leak. Something bad's going to happen because hard work requires incentivization. Remember, like behavioral economics and behavioral design doesn't replace traditional economics. It supplements, right? It's a nudge instead of a shove. But sometimes you need a shove. If it's a hard to do behavior, don't use nudges, use shoves.
Yeah, and it might be connected to the trigger that part of it is fear. Like the reason they're using it is the fear that something will happen, right?
More than that, it needs to be not only will something happen to their enterprise, but something's going to happen to their job, right? Like personally, do I really care if my company gets hacked? Yeah, kind of. But what I more care about is losing my salary.
Great.
Right. So you need to find the person whose job it is to do this and make sure that the proper incentives. And this is, that's lots of people can tell you that. That's kind of common sense. I guess the insight I can give you is being able to be very critical about where do you need the habits, right? And by the way, there's still things you can use from the hooked methodology. For example, B equals MAT, right? One thing I would ask you is, can you break down that 20-minute task into smaller tasks, right? If you're seeing, hey, already people do the 5-minute tasks without too much trouble, is there a way to break down the friction of the 20-minute task into smaller tasks? Perhaps, I don't know. I have no idea, right? We just started talking. But you can, that's a tactic that comes straight out of Hooked. What I'm saying is, if you have a product that's never going to become a habit, you can still use these tactics. You just don't need all of them. But if you're building a product that requires a habit, then you have to have all of them. If you don't check all the boxes, you're not going to have a habit. But you can take those tactics from the book, increasing ability, making the triggers more clear, increasing user investment, things like that. Sure, you can use those all piecemeal, one at a time.
Okay, that's good.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Aviv. And moving back to Homer Kirschenbaum with a question on user psychology.
Hey, Nir, thank you again.
Hey, Omer.
So similarly to a lot of people in this course, I'm about to start a new position as a product manager. And you speak a lot about the importance of understanding the psychology behind user behavior when designing products. Maybe you started to answer this question before, but how can new product managers or product managers generally go about and research to understanding user psychology, except of reading Hooked, of course? And how can they use that knowledge to design better products?
So I think it's filling your brain with these frameworks around what drives behavior. So I think the most important thing you can do is just try and adopt the language that can help you communicate this kind of stuff. I think that many times when you hear cognitive biases or heuristics or psychological phenomena from consumer psychology, when you hear them, you're like, yeah, that's common sense, like loss aversion. Okay. Like hyperbolic discounting, right? Daniel Kahneman, fellow Israeli, won the Nobel Prize for his work on hyperbolic discounting. But when you hear it explained simply that people want rewards today, people value rewards given today more than they do those given tomorrow. Yeah. Common sense, right? but there's no word for it, right? So it wasn't until Kahneman said hyperbolic discounting that people understood what that means and they could integrate into the product. So if everyone in your enterprise knows what variable rewards are, you don't have to explain it. Oh, it's that thing that happens when there's uncertainty and mystery, blah, 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 blah. You don't have to read the whole chapter in my book. You just say the word and everybody gets it. So I think one of the best things you can do is to educate yourself on what these words mean so that, and then educate people in your organization so that when you're sitting around the table and you say, hey, you know what, I wonder what would happen if we tried loss aversion, or if we tried, whatever technique, the IKEA effect, for example, the work of Dan Ariely, then you don't have to explain them every time. You just have that vocabulary and you can start working them into the product design because everybody's already on the same page with the same vernacular.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Cool. Yeah, that was awesome. We've actually ran out of the questions that we prepared beforehand. So we're going to open the questions for the entire class. If anyone wants to pop up with a question for Nir, now's your last chance. And if not, then maybe we'll ask Nir for some last advice for upcoming junior products.
Please. Yeah, I love questions.
I can try.
Sure.
I'm sorry?
Go for it. Ron?
Hi. Yes, can I give it a try? Okay, so first of all, thank you for talking with us today. It's a great pleasure.
Sure.
I'm currently engineer, R&D engineer, and I'm hoping to become a product soon enough, junior product at least. My question is looking at overcoming distractions, connecting it to previous lectures. Target is considered as a good practice in defining a target for yourself. So the practice of defining a schedule or managing a schedule, can it be viewed as a continuous target handling, managing, or to overcome daily distractions? The thing is with target, sure. Okay, I'll try to redefine it. Okay. Target, for me at least, is considered as a good practice to overcome distractions. Though most of the people do not define targets for most of the things they do, even for products. As I see,
what do you mean by target?
What do you want to get? Okay, what are you hoping to get for?
You're talking about for your personal schedule or for a product?
No, I mean it's defining a schedule for your personal schedule. Okay.
Okay.
Is it? Sorry, I haven't defined it previously. But having a personal schedule, can it be looked as a way to handle your personal targets, to continuously prioritize your personal target, and also, of course, for work, for home, for another habit? Is it?
Yeah, I think I understand your question. So, yeah, so how do you essentially come up with this schedule? Is that kind of the question?
The question was, how do I connect it? Like having a target and managing a schedule.
I see. So having goals, of what you want to accomplish and the schedule. Yeah. Okay, great. So this is actually part of why to-do lists are terrible. I'll get into this. So to-do lists are one of the worst things you can do for your personal productivity, because what are to-do lists? To-do lists are nothing but a list of things you want to finish, right? Or actually things you want to have finished. You don't want to do them. You want to have done them. And the problem with to-do lists is that there's no constraint. You can always add more and more and more and more to your to-do list, all kinds of goals you want to accomplish. So there's no limit to all those things. So here's what happens with the to-do list. You come home from work and you have a million things on your to-do list, and you've spent all day working your butt off, and yet you haven't done all these things on your list because it's a never-ending list. And so what happens to your self-image? What happens to the way you view yourself? If you said you were going to do all these things, you made a promise with yourself and you didn't do them, loser, right? You begin to have this self-image of someone who doesn't keep promises to themselves. And so it's not that you're broken, right? There's nothing wrong with you. It's that this system is broken. So just to be clear, there's nothing wrong with taking things out of your brain and putting them on a piece of paper. That's great. But that's where most people stop. What they're missing is to put that on your schedule. And I want you to measure yourself not by how many cute little boxes you checked off. That's the wrong metric of success. Okay. It's not how many cute little boxes, how many goals you accomplished, how many targets you hit. That's not the right metric. The right metric is, did I work on what I said I would work on? Did I do what I said I was going to do for as long as I said I would without distraction? That's it. I didn't say, did I finish? I said, did I do what I said I was going to do for as long as I said I would without distraction? And that could be 10 minutes, it could be 15 minutes, it could be half an hour. It doesn't matter how long, but did I do that one thing without distraction? Now, here's the kicker. The people who use this tactic, the people who simply measure themselves by whether they were able to do what they said they were going to do without distraction for as long as they said they would, they actually finish more. They finish more of their tasks. They complete more of their goals than the people who use the to-do list. Why? Because to-do lists they don't have any feedback mechanism. This is why people are so bad at predicting how long things take for them to finish. Right? On average, a task will take people 3 times longer than they predict. Why? Because most people, when they have a bunch of lists of targets, right, a bunch of goals, they work on this thing for 5 minutes and it gets hard. So let me just check email for a quick second. And oh, there's that Slack channel. And oh, let me just check this news real quick. And oh yeah, what was that thing that I was doing? Let me get back to that. Whereas the person who says, I'm just going to do one thing for 30 minutes and nothing else, now they have a feedback loop. They can look at it and say, okay, I know I need to deliver a presentation of 30 slides. And look, in 30 minutes, I did 3 slides. Okay, so now if I do 30 minutes times 10, I'll finish the whole presentation. So there's a feedback loop. They start figuring out how long things take them. Whereas with a to-do list, you can't do that. So having a time-boxed calendar, even if it's for a little bit of time, just building that muscle, that practice of working on a task without distraction leads you to much better productivity over time.
Can I have a follow-up question regarding that answer?
Sure.
So, but the problem is with what you suggested is that maybe it's my history is in a gaming company, but that you don't have any reward loop. So if you have a checkbox or to-do list with a lot of checkbox, when I finish something or I click here, I finished that task, then I get an immediate reward. Like I'm happy. I finished 60% of my to-do list, and it's like the simple reward loop.
Quite the opposite. In fact, you reward yourself with the to-do list technique. You reward yourself only when you finish. So let's say you have a big quarterly goal. Okay. You don't get to reward yourself until it's done in like 3 months. Whereas when you measure yourself by all I do to pat myself on the back and say, good job, is did I work on it for 30 minutes? That's it. If I did it, or whatever amount of time, of course, you understand. So 10 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, doesn't matter. You get an instant reward every time you're able to work without distraction. That's your only goal. It becomes these temporary, these momentary goals that lead up to completion of the project, right? But based on being able to focus, as opposed to what most people do. What most people do is they have a big goal and then they say, oh, it's so much work. I'll get to it tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. And they do all this stupid little easy and urgent stuff. My boss needs me and this and email and the Slack channels, that they don't get to the important stuff they have to actually work on every day. And then at the last moment, they work real fast on the task. And of course, the work suffers for it. They do really bad work at the end of the day because they procrastinated. Whereas if you work on it consistently a little bit every day and measure yourself by, did I work on the task that I said I was going to work on without distraction? And that's it. That's all I got to do. Then you reward yourself every time you work on that task.
Well, okay, thanks.
Sure.
That was very interesting. So I think we can take one last question from Inbal. She wrote it on the chat. Inbal, would you mind introducing it?
Yeah. Hi, nice to meet you. I'm Inbal. I'm a product and UX. So I was wondering if you noticed that you needed to adjust the hooked model when the users are women or children, because women are different than men. Children are definitely different in terms of psychologically, cognitive way, or even ethically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what changes about the hook model is not the 4 basic steps. And then you could, by the way, you can expand expand this not only to women or children, you can extend this to nationalities, right? That the hook model applies, as far as I know, with current research, everyone, everywhere. The 4 steps: trigger, action, reward, investment, same 4 steps. What's different is what rewards people. So 2 people, for example, might have the same internal trigger, that same uncomfortable emotion, let's say boredom, okay? And so what one person uses to scratch the itch of boredom might be watching football, and another might be reading a book. For one person, it might be chatting with a friend. For one person, it might be, going for a walk. So how we satisfy that itch changes, right? People have different preferences. But the fundamental emotion and the 4 steps that go into the hook model, that doesn't change for anyone. But of course, what scratches the itch will change based on personal preference. And of course, statistically, women prefer some things versus one culture. Not that many people are into sumo wrestling in Israel, but a lot of people love sumo wrestling in Japan, right? So you can have different ways to scratch the itch. And then in terms of ethical standards on children, absolutely. So we talked about that protected class of people who are pathologically addicted. I think we need protections for those people. We absolutely do need, and I think, we have many protections for children. My 14-year-old daughter can't walk into a bar and order a beer. She can't go into a casino and start gambling on the blackjack tables. And of course, I think there should be there should be certain protections for children for things that they do online. And I think that's up to not only the makers of these products, but also, of course, to parents to make sure that kids can't access things that they're not ready for.
Thank you.
Sure.
Cool. So Aviv Tumi has one last question that he wanted to try and fit in as well. So Aviv.
Sure.
Yeah. So in order to onboard other teammates with those ideas, let's say I read your book and I want to use it. I find it a bit hard to tell others without they read it by themselves. So do you have any exercises or team building games we can do to develop this way of thinking?
Yeah. So if you, so there's a few things you can do. So one is maybe, as opposed to giving them the book, show them the video. So there's a lot of videos on YouTube. I think we actually circulated one that's like a 30-minute video. So, hey, I found this interesting. And then there's actually a workbook on my site. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Did you guys find the workbook by chance already? The hooked workbook? Let me see if I can just put it into the chat here. I'll make your life a little easier. Where is it? I may have to send it to you. Where is it? Sorry, I need to go digging around for it a little bit. But there is on my website. Oh, there we go. Somebody found it already?
Perfect.
Oh, great. You found it. Excellent. You're faster than I am. There we go. Perfect. There it is. There's the PDF. So there's lots of exercises in here. Many of these are pulled right out of the book. Even if you just use this, by the way, even if you just use this one at a time, if you just asked a few of these questions and say, hey, let's have an interesting intellectual discussion around this stuff. Whether we do it or not is a whole nother question, but let's just talk about, hey, do we have a good hook? Do we have these fundamental elements of a habit forming product built into our product already? And of course, if you don't have this challenge, it may or may not get the best reception. But of course, if you have this problem, if your boss or your supervisor is saying, hey, what's wrong with our retention? Why is our churn so high? Why aren't people coming back? I know, our hook sucks. Let's work on the hook.
All right. Okay. Good stuff. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. So this was super fascinating. Personally, I really enjoyed the questions and really the answers as well. Just before we farewell, as you know, our students are about to graduate their 15-week training to become junior product managers. And the market isn't doing its best at the moment, as you probably know, but we do believe that they will find their first product positions soon enough. What kind of advice can you give them for their first year as junior product managers?
What kind of advice can I give you? So I think it's important to remember why we do what we do. That it's not about making money. It's not about prestige. It's about helping people live better lives. That fundamentally, the reason our work is so important is that we are solving people's pain. That's what we do, right? We recognize what problems they have, and we try and ease those problems. We try and make their lives better through our products and services. So I think keeping that as your North Star, remembering that that's your purpose, is you want to improve people's lives through the products they use. I think that's provides me a lot of meaning. It's why I love what I do. And I hope it will inspire you as well.
Perfect and awesome. Eyal, thank you so much for coming over to answer our questions. It was really an honor to have you around for our closing session. We would be very happy to host you in other events that we're having in the future. I'll definitely talk to you about it after this session. And we'll, of course, share the student feedback with you sometime soon after the session as well. So thank you so much.
Fantastic.
Guys. If you can stay with me, we're going to be doing a short feedback session for the program and get a little bit of your input. First, if you want to unmute yourself and say thank you for Nir just before he's going, you're welcome to do so.
Thank you, Nir.
Thanks,
Thanks so
everyone.
much.
Thank
you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much.
Bye.
תודה רבה. נו, אז איך היה?
מעולה.
ממש.
וואי,
ממש מעולה.
מרתק.
יש. תדעו לכם שהסילבוס של הקורס שלכם הוא מאוד מאוד עמוס. אני לא יודע אם שמתם לב, אבל יש הרבה מאוד תוכן שנכנס שם.